not sell it along the way to pay.
Looks like we have everybody here, so let's get started. So good afternoon and welcome to the May 3rd, 2024 regular meeting of the Regional Planning Committee. I'm Joe LaCava, chair of the committee and the representative for the city of San Diego. Before I move forward, I would like to ask our interpreter to provide instructions on how to access interpretation.
Announcement from the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, World, and select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on the mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, el globo terráqueo y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés, en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo.
Thank you. Gracias. I will now ask our clerk, Ms. Francesca Webb, to confirm we have a quorum and to give instructions on voting and commenting.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum. For those members in the room, if you'd like to make a comment on an item, please fill out a speaker slip that's in the lobby. If you are online on Zoom, please use the Zoom mobile app to raise your hand, and I will call on you in the order that your hands were raised.
All right, thank you, Francesca. I'd like to start the meeting with the Kumeyaay land acknowledgement. For millennia, the Kumeyaay people have been a part of this land. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We promote this balance and harmony. We find inspiration from this land, the land of the Kumeyaay. I'll now call the May 3rd, 2024 meeting of the Regional Planning Committee to order. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. We will now take up non-agenda public comment. Per our board policy, the amount of time allowed for each verbal public comment is determined based on the number of agenda items, the complexity of those items, and the number of persons anticipated to offer comment. This allows us to hear from as many people as possible and to complete our business while we still have a quorum. Based on those factors for today's meeting, each member of the public will be allowed 2 minutes for their comments. Francesca, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
Thank you, Chair. We do have one member of the public who'd like to speak. The original draw. You can go ahead when you're ready.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate the 2 minutes. A lot of times it doesn't happen. And I think it's important if you guys want to hear from the public that you should allow more time. As far as the regional planning goes, for everything, it's just sad to see that we have an invasion on our border happening, and it's not really something that is talked about in a realistic manner. We talk about it through providing funds to, entities, NGOs to kind of hide what's really going on so that the public isn't aware so much of the invasion. And, we see other countries, cities in the nation that are suffering immensely from the influx of, all the people coming through the border, and many of them come through our border. and they're going to New York and to Chicago, and these places are suffering immensely. I mean, the amount of cuts that are having to come, even just, you know, from police departments, from different things, even in Denver, hospitals closing. It's a concern to think about, you know, the influx possibly going to an increase of 5,000 individuals a day crossing the border, and what that means for our community, and other communities, you know, across the nation where they're also going to. I mean, we also have, you know, many that aren't being picked up by Border Patrol and they're missing, and there's 45 million people that have crossed into our nation. The numbers that, you know, DHS and the federal government provide are a very low number. And it's just kind of sad to see that we don't ever talk about it and what we plan to do in order to make sure that the community is able to continue to, you know, I mean, it's not thriving, but just move forward without regressing. And I just think that should be an item that you guys talk about seriously.
That concludes the public comments.
All right, thank you. Any comments from committee members? Not seeing any. We'll move on to our consent agenda. There's only one item on the consent agenda. That's approval of the minutes from the March 1st meeting. Francesca, do we have any public comment on the consent item?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the original draw, you can go ahead.
Yeah, in the minutes you were talking about value capture. And, you know, that's something that is a little bit scary to think about, because you're trying to benefit off of, you know, the increases in taxes that are going to come through providing, you know, density in certain areas. And as we have people that are suffering every day just to make ends meet, it's sad to hear that you want to benefit off the backs of the people that are barely able to pay their bills and pay their taxes. And if they don't, then they get their home taken away. And that's something that you guys benefit from as well, because then you can make money off of them losing their home. So it's something that, you know, it doesn't sound good when the way it's talked about when you want to benefit off of things like that, and all by pushing people densely, and then it actually takes homes away from people because it pushes them out of being able to possibly build a home if they wanted to on that land that has now had an increase in value because of all the density that's being brought there. And then we're not even able to provide the affordable homes for the people that are being displaced. And then as far as the World Capital Design Center, again, with the invasion on our border, it's really sad to see that we're more concerned about the business that is done with Mexico, as opposed to talking about what we can do to stop the influx of illegals crossing the border. It's an invasion happening, and the idea is to destroy America from within, and that's the exact way to do it. It can also, you know, affect the voting when they're being registered to vote, and being able to get all of these services that the people in the communities aren't able to. So I think you need to be mindful when you hold up your relationship with Mexico over the safety of the people in our communities, especially when a little girl has already been raped by an illegal and it's being hidden. It's not good.
That concludes the public comments.
All right, thank you. Unless there's any corrections, can I get a motion to approve the minutes? All right. You're not a committee member, right? Yes.
I'll second, Chair, if it matters.
Sir. All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Donovan and a second by Councilmember Musgrove. Please vote. We're going to use, since we're all here. Thank you, sir, though. And that passes unanimously. Who are we missing?
Not me.
You.
Yeah, you didn't vote.
Oh, you hit the one down here. Okay.
Where's it at?
All right, that item passes unanimously. Little bumps. All right, so we'll now take up the report, starting with item 3. which is working groups reporting to the Regional Planning Committee. Stacy Cooper will give an overview of the board reporting structure and working groups report to the RPC and key agenda topics for 2024. Stacy?
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Stacy Cooper, Senior Planner on the Sustainable Communities Team and your RPC Staff Liaison. Today, I'm going to give a high-level overview of the board reporting structure and have the working group liaisons introduce themselves and the responsibilities of their committees. As you know, SANDAG board is governed by a board of directors made up of elected officials from the region's 18 cities and the county. The board serves as a forum for bringing together our local governments and public agencies to plan, program, and implement comprehensive planning across the region. To help our board in their decision-making, we vet our research, data, and suggestions for action through 6 policy advisory committees, or PACs. The 6 committees are executive, audit, borders, public safety, transportation, and regional planning. The primary role of the Regional Planning Committee is to provide recommendations on the development and implementation of the regional plan and sustainable community strategy, and advise the board on other regional planning issues related to habitat, climate, and land use, among others. SANDAG working groups are advisory bodies that report to the PAC on a specialized area of responsibility. All working groups are chaired by an appointed elected official and fully comply with the Brown Act. There are 4 working groups that report to RPC: Sustainable Communities, Social Equity, Shoreline Preservation, and Military. I'll pass it over to Sarah to tell you about the Sustainable Communities Working Group.
Thank you, Stacy. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Toma, Senior Regional Planner here at SANDAG. I'm the liaison for the Sustainable Communities Working Group. The purpose of the group is to carry out and promote cross-agency coordination on the development and implementation of the Sustainable Communities Strategy, which is also known as SCS. Of the SANDAG's regional plan. Our membership includes 1 voting member and 2 alternate members from each SANDAG member agency. The group meets every other month. Our current chair is Councilmember Joy Lins from the city of Encinitas. She's wonderful to work with, and the team really enjoys having her as our chair. Your go-to staff for the Sustainable Communities Working Group is myself and Chesley DeLeon, and both of our contact information is here on the slide. So please, we're always happy to assist. Don't hesitate to reach out. We're also very excited to discuss key topics with the working group this year. One of the main priority will be the regional plan and the SCS. The Sustainable Communities Working Group, largely made up of planning directors and managers. They are an important connection to jurisdiction as we move forward with the development of the regional plan. Other key topics include habitat conservation, climate action plan, and the housing acceleration program. We look forward to collaborating with the working group, and that concludes my part. I'm going to turn it over to Paula Zambrano. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes, Hauka, to everybody. I am the staff liaison for the Social Equity Working Group. My name is Paula Zamudio. I'm a senior equity planner here at SANDAG. You can see more on the group on this slide. I think key here is that the membership of this group is made up of representatives from community-based organizations that we are under contract with. Their primary purpose really is to make sure that we are hearing from the many diverse voices throughout our region, in particular those in communities that have been historically underrepresented and underserved. You can see on this map here, it's our region overlaid with the Callan virus screen. As I'm sure you're all aware, the Callan virus screen is a mapping tool that shows the relationship between exposure to environmental burdens and socioeconomic and health vulnerabilities. The red and the yellow areas on the map show the parts of our region with the most vulnerabilities. Thank you. Back there, Kendall. We do recognize, or first you can see all the numbers, and those are all of the CBOs that are represented on the Social Equity Working Group. We do recognize that there are some gaps. We did go through an extensive RFP process to work with these 12 CBOs. That was initially completed in 2022. And seeing that we had some gaps, we went back out. Our first round resulted in 11 CBOs. We were able to secure 1 additional CBO. That would be number 2 up there in Escondido Education Compact. So they came on board a little bit later. And we are already looking at ways that we can add additional organizations, including CBOs who work with populations that are throughout the county, like seniors or people with disabilities, for the next round of our contracting process. And then while the main purpose of the Social Equity Working Group is really to weigh in on the regional plan, they do provide input and are involved in many other SANDAG planning efforts. For example, staff worked really closely with the Social Equity Working Group throughout the planning and implementation of the Youth Opportunity Pass. And then, of course, this slide shows some of the other topics that the group has already weighed in on or will weigh in on this year. And I believe I am now passing it over to Keith.
Yeah, Paul, thank you. Could you advance the slides? Thank you. Courtney Becker, our lead for Shoreline Preservation Program, is out today, so I'll be giving her presentation. I'm Keith Greer. I'm the Deputy Planning Director in charge of our environmental compliance and climate programs. So the Shoreline Preservation is the oldest working group at SANDAG, and it has been meeting continuously since the 1980s. Back in the 1980s, we had a very strong El Nino winter to kind of rip the sand off the beaches, caused a lot of coastal damage to properties and infrastructure. And at that point in time, the coastal jurisdiction said we need to get together and talk about a long-term strategy for those El Ninos and also for adapting to climate change. So since the 1980s, the elected officials from the 8 coastal jurisdictions and the 2 bayfront cities have gathered together with state and federal agencies, along with coastal scientists and regional stakeholders, to discuss the ways to adapt to sea level rise causing from a changing climate, to retain both the beaches in San Diego and to manage the coastal resources. The group meets once a quarter. It is chaired by Del Mar City Council member Dwight Warden. And on that committee, we are lucky today to have 2 regional planning committee who's also on the Shoreline Preservation Working Group. Your chair here, Councilman LaClava, and also Councilmember Donovan. So what the group has been doing since 2001, SANDAG on behalf of the coastal jurisdictions have put 3.6 million cubic yards of sand on the various beaches throughout the region. That's enough for 1,100 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So a lot of effort. For fiscal year 25, SANDAG will be completing the necessary feasibility studies and economic analysis to attract funding for a 3rd regional beach sand project. The working group will also be looking at the shoreline adaptation strategies and discussing the need to possibly update the existing shoreline policies. Many of those policies are very old. They date back to the early 1990s, and some of them are completely outdated. Other 2 items we're working on is the review of the shoreline monitoring program. So since the 1990s, the coastal jurisdictions have gone together and funded a regional assessment of where the sand is and how the sand's moving across the region. And the idea is it helps us figure out our adaptation strategies and when we need to do next regional beach sand projects. And finally, the working group will be working with the Scripps Institute of Oceanography and other coastal sciences to learn how the current research is affecting how we manage our coastal resources out there. And we're really fortunate in San Diego to have Scripps right here. Councilmember Donovan and I have been working a lot with them to talk about how they're learning about how sand is moving up and down the littoral cell or the area off the coast. So lots going on, Shoreline Preservation Working Group. I'll now turn it over to April for the Military Working Group.
Thanks, Keith. So my name is April De Jesus. I'm the Military Working Group Liaison here at SANDAG, and I'm happy to see Muska, who is one of our voting members representing the Navy, and then also Councilmember Donovan, who's also been a regular attendee of our Military Working Group. Our chair is Deputy Mayor Steve Goebel, and we meet on a quarterly basis with membership from both representation from our Navy, Marine, and Coast Guard, as well as the local adjacent jurisdictions. And during these meetings, we talk about areas of mutual interests. Military families are really important to us because not only do they serve our country, but their families also live within the communities within San Diego. So several of issues that we talk about at the local jurisdiction level impact our military families. So it's really important for us to strategize our meetings. So very recently, we've had a lot of partnership opportunities with the Military Working Group. About 5 years ago, we completed a military multimodal access strategy where we met with each of the bases and identified priority projects of importance for mission readiness. This was a collaborative report that we completed that led to our first grant award from the Office of Local Development Community Cooperation. We did 2 phases of military installation resilience, which resulted in several new partnerships in the San Diego region. And then recently, Steve Goebel started as our chair last year, and we've been going back to each of the bases to better understand some of the challenges and see alignment with the projects that we work on at the SANDAG level. And our next military working group is actually this Monday at 9 a.m. in this room. So if any of you guys want to join us, feel free to come. We tried to strategize each of our agendas. So when we met with each of our voting members, they said they wanted to come to the working group for two reasons. One, to be educated on different projects that will impact them both on the military side and the adjacent local jurisdictions. And then two, what are some projects that we can collectively work together and either seek funding for or find partnerships to move forward. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, and I'll pass it back to Stacy.
And that concludes our presentation. So we're welcome to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. Francesca, do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The original draw, you can go ahead.
Crazy to think that we're surrounded by military and our border can be invaded. It's nuts. So with all of these, working groups and whatnot, and how you're just pushing all of this sustainability and, saving the climate and all this stuff, I mean, it would behoove you guys to understand and look into the fact that they pay to modify the weather, to geoengineer. So as much money as you spend to try and stop the climate from changing, you would have to defund the people that are actually manufacturing the weather. And I mean, look at Dubai. They had a cloud seeding program or whatnot that they paid for to do because of the drought. And then it brings about massive amounts of rain and flooding. Same thing happened with the flooding here in San Diego. And they were cloud seeding during, before, and after the storms. So, you won't acknowledge those things because, as I say, it's like you can't worship this climate god and say that all of these things are changing. And then you have all these, regulations and you have to be in compliance. It has nothing to do with saving the planet, because if it did, and you could really do that, you wouldn't be destroying it in the process by, trying to bring in electric vehicles or solar panels or, all of these lithium batteries. They're combustible, they're bombs, but also they don't save any energy because whatever they're produced, whatever it takes to produce them is never going to be less than what they're going to be in their lifetime. So, all this money and things that you do and regulations that come forward to try and do this, it's more about controlling the people and putting us in densely populated areas, period. It has nothing to do with anything but that. And you should really look into cloud seeding and all of those things. I understand you think it's probably a conspiracy, but it is a conspiracy happening on the people. It's not a theory.
That concludes the public comments.
All right, thank you. This is an information item, no motion is required, but I'll turn it over to committee members for comments and questions. Not hearing any. I'll just say thank you for staffing those various working groups. Very much appreciated. Certainly appreciate the people that take up a very busy calendar with attending one more meeting. Very important. And the work that gets done there filters up all the way to the full board. So very much appreciate all that good work. So not seeing any more comments, we'll move right along. Item 4, 25 years of conservation planning, successes, challenges, and what's next. Turn it over to Kim Smith to present this item.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me here to talk about 25 years of conservation planning. Again, my name is Kim Smith. I'm a senior regional planner here at SANDAG. I manage our Transnet Environmental Mitigation Program and work on all things related to habitat conservation. So today, again, my presentation focuses on 25 years of conservation planning, what have been our successes, our challenges, what has been SANDAG's role, and what's next for our region. So by a quick show of hands, I'm just curious to know how many of you guys are native San Diegans. That's a good number. So if you look at the slide in front of you, you'll really see that San Diego is a very special place. It is also an ecologically diverse region. I don't know if there's anywhere else in the region where you could hike, you're at the beach hiking along the Marsh Trail, you drive through the pine forests of Julian Alpine, and then drop down into the Anza Borrego Desert to see the super bloom, all within about an hour and a half. So I think that is what makes our region definitely unique. So because it has those features like a diverse topography, geological conditions, and a mild Mediterranean climate, the San Diego region contains several rare and unique ecological and biological resources that make it a global biodiversity hotspot. In addition, it has more endangered species than any other county in the continental US. So pretty impressive. In order to address this impact of growth on species and habitats, back in the early 90s, the state of California responded with the Natural Communities Conservation Planning Act, or the NCCP. The NCCP is a proactive ecosystem planning effort for the protection of multiple species and their habitats through the adoption of integrated habitat conservation plans by local jurisdictions. The areas that the NCCP covered were San Diego, Riverside, Orange, San Bernardino, and parts of Los Angeles counties. And there were 3 targeted species, the California gnatcatcher, the coastal cactus wren, and the orange-throated whiptail, and their coastal sage scrub habitat that were selected for this project. And then moving down to the more regional level, the San Diego region then expanded on the state's goals and embarked on its own regional scale habitat conservation planning. Again, the goal was to protect multiple species of concern, their habitats and ecological processes, but still allowing for planned development and economic growth. This effort fits into the larger state of California's 30 by 30 initiative designed to protect 30% of California's lands and coastal waters by 2030. And if you look on the slide, the first plan was the MSCP South, which is shown in lime green. That was adopted in 1997, covering central San Diego and southern San Diego counties. Then we had the MHCP, which is the Multiple Habitat Conservation Program in North San Diego, was adopted in 2003, with the North County and East County plans shown in tan and yellow that are still pending. So SANDAG was helped to implement and develop these plans and has also supported the local, state, and federal entities in their implementation. So now let's move on to some of our successes. We should be really proud as the region has made investments and acquisition since the inception of these plans. Over 90,000 acres have been acquired for conservation, and that's shown in the pink color on your slide. And that at a cost of 1.2 million in today's, billion in today's dollars. Of note is the establishment of the San Diego National Wildlife Refuge down in South County, and the expansion of the State Ecological Reserve. This is an effort that would not be possible without all of our conservation partners coming together, local, state, and federal governments and NGOs to help identify and fund the acquisition of these properties. So with those successes, though, has come challenges. And as you know, the region still faces considerable challenges from threats. As we're seeing in real time, climate change is exacerbating things like wildfires, flooding like we saw back in January, and drought. We're seeing the increase in new invasive plant and animal species like feral pigs, and also the increase in unmanaged human use of habitat lands. We're seeing more encampments, more dumping, and more off-road access, including some of the newer off-road access like e-bikes. In addition, the lack of a permanent regional funding source, as was originally envisioned by the habitat conservation plans, have left the management of conserved lands underfunded. Without public awareness and education and potentially a champion, the future of conservation in San Diego could be in question. So what has SANDAG contributed? As mentioned previously, SANDAG has helped with the development of all these conservation plans and has supported the local, state, and federal entities in their implementation through programs like the Transnet Environmental Mitigation Program. So what is the Transnet EMP? So just as a quick background, the Transnet Extension is a 40-year program approved by the voters in November of 2004. The goal of the EMP was to promote the advanced acquisition of habitats in order to mitigate our transportation project impacts, in addition to providing funding for regional habitat conservation purposes, including land acquisition, management, and monitoring activities in order to implement those habitat conservation plans. The original estimate for the program was $850 million. Of that, you can see broken down, we had about $600 million for our regional transportation projects and $250 million for mitigation for our local transportation projects. Of the annual Transnet revenues, 6.2% of the total revenues coming in goes to the EMP. And the great news is that this percentage of revenue is lockbox, so it has to stay with the EMP. It can't be moved around to fund other aspects of Transnet. So what have been our contributions to date? SANDAG has helped acquire over 40 properties throughout the region, totaling over 9,000 acres of land. That's about 1/10 of that overall acreage, that 90,000 acreage that we conserved as a region. In addition, we've over 800 acres of land has been restored to habitat types such as vernal pools, upland habitats like coastal sage scrub and wetlands. This is a total investment of $164 million with $33.2 million of non-Transnet funding that we've leveraged from our conservation partners that is helping us build out our regional preserve. We've also secured mitigation for over 3/4 of our Transnet early action projects, including implementation of 2 large lagoon restoration projects. San Elijo Lagoon is shown on the screen above, and then we're also finishing up construction at the San Dieguito Lagoon for a large 84-acre coastal wetland project. Additional information on the key achievements of the EMP is also provided as a link in the report, item 4, page 17 of your agenda. In addition, the EMP has contributed over $59 million to the region to help with the management and monitoring of our open space lands from those threats that were previously mentioned. To date, there have been a total of 136 projects awarded funding through our very successful land management grant program, totaling $18.8 million to local jurisdictions, organizations, and nonprofits in the region. And you can see some examples of projects that, on the screen above. Those projects include some habitat restoration. We do non-native species eradication in order to help species such as the western snowy plover, fencing projects to protect the open space lands, all that aim to protect native species and their habitats. And finally, the regional monitoring program has been another success for our region. The EMP established the first ever regional entity, the San Diego Management and Monitoring Program, or SDMMP, to coordinate efforts to integrate science into the management and monitoring of open space. Last year, the SDMMP released the State of the Preserve Report and State of the Preserve Metrics Dashboard that details the health of our regional preserve in real time, including information on how the region is doing in implementing their HCPs. Item 4, page 17 of your report provides a link to sdmmp.com where you can access the report and dashboard. And I definitely encourage all of you to check that out. The dashboard is real-time data. We've got a lot of data on the species habitats that inhabit these regional preserves. So it's a great resource. So moving on, what's next for our region? Over the past year, SANDAG has been focusing its efforts to work with our conservation stakeholders and members of our Habitat Conservation Task Force to implement the Regional Habitat Conservation Vision as identified in our 2021 Regional Plan. And the vision is really simple. It's to protect, connect, and respect. The vision sets out goals and objectives in order to complete our regional HCPs to protect sensitive habitats and species in San Diego for future generations. Specifically, the plan identified $3 billion for habitat-related efforts, including habitat conservation, management, and monitoring. It identified funding for nature-based climate solutions programs, and also for land acquisition and restoration for habitat mitigation for our transportation projects. So it identified funding. However, there were no details on how those funds would be specifically spent or what the gaps in conservation are. And this is where the near-term actions come in.
SANDAG is tasked to complete a regional habitat conservation assessment to identify and monetize the gaps in conservation efforts throughout our region and assess opportunities to close those gaps. In September of this past year, SANDAG partnered with the San Diego Natural History Museum and the University of San Diego Nonprofit Institute to develop a regional stakeholder workshop to look at this specifically the state of biodiversity in the region and help identify those gaps, priorities, and opportunities. And it's really a unique and exciting collaboration I'm very excited about because the NAT has over 150 years of working in conservation within the San Diego region. The development of the workshop was informed by a 12-person steering committee with representatives from our Habitat Conservation Task Force and other representatives from resource agencies, the county, nonprofits, and our tribal community. So on February 22nd, SANDAG and the NAT hosted this workshop, which was, as you can see on the slide, the San Diego Biodiversity Conservation Summit. It was very successful. We had over 200 participants from the conservation sector, including local jurisdictions, government, academia. We had nonprofits represented, our tribal and military partners, and organizations from across the border. Our aim for the summit and subsequent report is to be a tool for everyone to effectively address our region's most urgent conservation needs in the coming years. Since the summit in February, our team has been busy looking at the data and putting it into a draft regional habitat conservation report. On April 18th, the NAT hosted its 7th annual State of Biodiversity Symposium, where we released some of the preliminary draft results of the report. And now our next steps include a draft report that will be coming out in May. It's going to be released for public review through the Natural History Museum. And then we expect to have that final report sometime in August. After August, SANDAG staff will then be using the report to evaluate and monetize our regional habitat conservation needs with some sort of a draft white paper presented to our task force in the fall. And all of this information will then be incorporated into the 2025 regional plan. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you, Kim. Francesca, do we have any public comment on this item?
Thank you, Chair. The original draw, you can go ahead.
Man, the propaganda is so crazy because it's all based off of lies. And we are the carbon they want to reduce. So, you know, I mean, no matter what you do, you're not going to save the planet, but you'll spend billions of dollars to preserve land. It makes me wonder how many more acres, probably hundreds of thousands by the time you guys are done, you're going to want to, you know, acquire and try to, you know, preserve. But a lot of times these places turn into landfills and they're not even really taken care of. But it's sad to see communities suffer so much. And, you know, the homeless, like anything that money gets thrown at, because it's a business, just like this is a business. This is going to drive people into poverty because just of how much money it costs just to pretend to save something. I mean, it's like, you know, taking vaccines that destroy your immune system, but pretending to save it. I mean, there's just been so many lies that we've been told throughout our lives. And it's sad to see so many people push this kind of stuff, but then refuse to want to look into something like geoengineering or weather modification. And it exists. I mean, there's states that are banning it. And, you know, it's just, but others, like it's never acknowledged. You should be having an item. Like if you really cared about saving the planet, you would want to look into that. You would want to look into if there are people manufacturing all of this stuff, because it's like money's going at both ends of it. It's never going to stop. It's like cancer research. And then, you know, you're the one that causes cancer, but you're doing the research and providing some kind of community like the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation to pretend to stop it. So, I mean, it's just sad. It's sad that more people don't see that. And it's sad that people push it and get paid to push it. And it actually, you know, makes people suffer in the process because people lose everything because of it.
All right, this item is also informational and the motion required, but I'll turn over to committee members for any comments or questions of staff.
I just have a quick one.
Yes.
So first, Kim, I wanted to thank you. That was a great presentation and you're doing really important work, not just for us to enjoy the region now, but for generations to come. So it was a feel-good item. So thank you for that. My only comment is that I think from a communication standpoint, a public relations standpoint, I think there's a need to educate the community as to what you're doing, because a lot of them are grateful for it, but they don't know how much work goes into it by this organization. So that's my only suggestion, but I wanted to thank you.
Councilmember Dillard.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Kim, so much for that presentation and the very important work that you are doing. There was a slide, and I can't remember which slide it was, maybe 4 or 5, where you were showing some pending portions, some very large pending portions. There was a part in the East County. It said pending. And I'm assuming that no preservation work is being done in those 2 areas. I think it was North County and East area. And I'm just wondering, is that on the calendar anytime soon to have anything done there?
That's a good question. So the county is leading efforts on both of those plans. And I know they're farther along on the North County plan, so the North County MSCP. And I believe they've had some public workshops they're moving into the EIR portion or process of that plan. So that's farther along. And then as far as the East County goes, I think that's going to follow along after the North County plan.
But there's no year or anything like that.
I'm not sure what
Expect.
the year for the East County. No, I'm not sure about the North County. It's within the next couple years.
Okay.
It's been they've been moving through this effort for a long time, but they are working on it right now. And I can follow up with more information if you're interested.
I can provide a little bit more effort on that too. So the County of San Diego is working on the North County plan first. And within a couple of years, they'll have a plan out and up to their board of supervisors. They're delaying the East County until the North County is being done to figure out what and how much needs to be conserved. So they're doing it systematically. And just to address the vice chair's question, absolutely. At the symposium that Kim was talking about, the Natural History Museum, one of the prevailing themes was the lack of understanding and knowledge in the community and the need to do more outreach. So that was a great comment and one that's been resonating a lot with the community out there as well.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair.
All right. I'm not seeing any. Oh, yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kim. That was really informative. I don't have a question, but rather a comment. I am not sure if you're aware of DoD's Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program. It's a pretty neat program where DoD provides funding, and the goal of this program is really encroachment management for DoD. But we do that by working with our partners on cost-sharing agreements to conserve for conservation projects. So that, to me, it seems like there's an opportunity to partner between SANDAG and DoD, and we would be happy to meet with you and explore that program further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that addition. I'll just a couple of quick comments. I'm old enough to remember having come from the development sector back in the days where developers each had to have their own individual battles with the state and federal resource agencies. And then that shift in the 90s, as you pointed out, that said, let's take a bigger picture, regional picture of that and begin to lock in the areas that are most important to preserve from habitat, from the flora and the fauna. And then you knew where the development could happen without too much discussion or debate, at least from a resource area. So it was really a game changer and really made sure that we had the opportunity for the housing development that we needed, but also gave protection to that valuable habitat. And to your point, not only is this really focused about habitat, but I think to the council member's comment, some of us forget that this is also what contributes to our quality of life because these lands were set aside for a variety of reasons and add to what is spectacular about our region here. I sit on the San Diego River Park Joint Powers Authority, so we appreciate the mitigation project to restore some of that lands there, and then those who had the foresight to protect a substantial chunk of that river valley and watershed that makes a huge difference. So the only question I had, and I think you touched on it, but just want to clarify, during budget cycles where we all get very nervous about cost, can you clarify clearly when SANDAG does a mitigation for a transportation project, you have to fund the mitigation, the monitoring for 4, 5 years or 10 years, depending on what you've done there. But from an ongoing basis for the land that was acquired and once those mitigations have been signed off, what funding responsibility does SANDAG have on an ongoing basis?
That's a great question. So if you take, for example, the larger San Diego Lagoon restoration project, so that funding for construction, planning and construction of that project was by the Environmental Mitigation Program as advanced mitigation for the I-5 North Coast Corridor Program. That project is wrapping up construction, then we'll have 5 to 10 years of monitoring. And once that is done, then most of the time we're looking to identify an entity in this example. It's the San Diego River Valley JPA that's going to be taking over the lands or owns most of those lands. And then the program is required to fund an endowment for the long-term management of those lands. So not only are we funding construction, planning, but we have to follow up with the funding for the management so it can be managed in perpetuity.
Great. Well, and to the caller's point, I remember back in the day where we set aside these lands and there was no endowment and they really lost their value, habitat value. So we learned a few valuable lessons or sometimes painful lessons on there. So I think we do a very good job now, although I think our jurisdictions often are challenged with how to protect some of these open spaces that were then left to the individual municipalities to manage. But anyway, thank you, Kim. Thank you for that summary of where we've been over the past 25 years. So we'll move on to item 5, which is the Housing Acceleration Program update. Again, I'll turn it over to Stacy Cooper and I believe Thomas DeFranco to present this item.
Good afternoon again. Again, I'm Stacy Cooper, Senior Planner on the Sustainable Communities team, and I work primarily on our Housing Acceleration Program. So Thomas and I are going to talk to you a little bit today about the REAP 1.0 funded initiatives. So our Housing Acceleration Program, or HAP, was launched with $6.8 million from the state's Regional Early Action Planning Grant Program of 2019, also known as REAP 1.0. This one-time funding prioritized planning activities that accelerate every time. Sorry. Okay. That accelerate housing production to meet the 6-cycle regional housing needs allocation goals, or RHNA. Additional REAP 2.0 funding was made available as part of the 2021 California Comeback Plan. REAP 2.0 builds on the success of REAP 1.0 and expands the program to address both the state's housing and climate goals. In May of last year, the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, approved SANDAG's full REAP 2.0 application, fully committing $43 million to our region. Since that time, we've moved forward with all of our proposed uses, including awarding $12.3 million to local jurisdictions through the HAP Cycle 2 grant program. However, the governor's draft FY 24-25 budget includes a $300 million reversion, or half of the REAP 2.0 program. Considering the uncertainty of the budget, we've had to pause many of our housing initiatives while we wait for the finalized budget and determine the next steps for our program. So today, we're going to focus on what we accomplished with REAP 1.0. At the end, I'm happy to answer any questions about what we were planning for REAP 2.0 as well. So to determine how REAP 1.0 funding would be the best benefit for our region, we engaged with member agencies and stakeholders to better understand the housing challenges and identify areas where we could best support our local jurisdictions. The word cloud on the top right shows some of those key themes, and we use this feedback we received to help us develop the Housing Acceleration Program. Staff also worked closely with a consultant on a pro-housing best practices study. The report established a baseline of information about regional housing trends and outlined pro-housing best practices and recommendations which help shape the housing program. The HAP strategy is available online, and there's links to all of these resources in your attachment. So the HAP strategy, published in 2022, outlines goals, policies, and actions to accelerate affordable, fair, and sustainable housing production across the San Diego region. It's a guide to help SANDAG address the housing crisis and reach our regional housing and climate goals, and includes near-term and continuous implementation actions. So our housing acceleration program and our strategy includes 3 core components: local jurisdiction support, which is technical resources and financial assistance to support the cities and the county; data analysis and policy resources, which is data, policy tools, and resources for the local jurisdictions and other stakeholders; and regional initiatives, studies, education, leadership, and funding opportunities to accelerate housing production. And on the next slide, we'll provide a little bit more on detail on each of these strategies. A large component of SANDAG's HAP is grant funding for local jurisdictions. In 2022, we awarded $1.9 million for 7 planning projects that accelerate housing production, facilitate implementation of the 6-cycle RENA. More information about the individual projects is available on our website. I'm going to pass it over to Thomas to talk a little bit about our technical assistance program.
Thanks, Stacy. Good afternoon, Regional Planning Committee. My name is Thomas DeFranco, and today I'll be introducing you to some of the work we've done with your jurisdictions through SANDAG's Technical Assistance Program. The TA program is designed with multiple components seen on the screen, which cater to the varying needs and capacities of your jurisdictions. In the following slides, I'll highlight a few of the components of the TA program and offer examples of the toolkits and data resources we've created. It's important to emphasize that engagement, communication, and collaboration are integral components of this program, driving the continuous development of the resources we provide to support your staff in dealing with the ever-changing housing policy and regulatory landscape. A significant portion of these resources so far have been focused on supporting the implementation of recently adopted state housing laws. For example, we've developed a toolkit for AB 2011 and SB 6, which provides an overview of these bills along with implementation checklists for city staff. You can also see on the slide some other examples of model ordinances and templates for objective design standards, AB 2097, AB 1033, and other recently passed state legislation. It's worth noting that many of these templates and toolkits initially began as individual requests by jurisdictions, but evolved into regional resources as other jurisdictions expressed similar needs. In addition to these resources, in-person training sessions and online webinars are another significant component of our TA program. These sessions are usually exclusive to jurisdiction staff in order to create a safe space where staff can openly discuss their challenges and collaborate comfortably. Typically, we schedule regional training sessions when new toolkits or resources are released. Our next regional training will be the land value capture later this May. Another vital component to highlight is our legislation tracking efforts. It's worth noting that we've collaborated with our consultant team to monitor legislation introduced within the past year, and we've conducted several update meetings to keep our jurisdictions informed about significant bills, including those we've specifically been requested to monitor. The final and perhaps most impactful component of our TA program is local staffing assistance. Through this program, we've allocated funds to provide each jurisdiction with free, direct, on-demand access to our team of consultants. This support is available for any requested work that aligns with the REAP program's objectives. As I mentioned in an earlier slide, many times a request from one jurisdiction has already been made by another, offering opportunities to create regional resources that benefit multiple jurisdictions. This regional support fosters connection between staff and facilitates knowledge sharing between jurisdictions working on similar topics. On the screen, you can see a variety of requests we've received showcasing the diverse needs in our region. We've already worked with most of your jurisdictions and are hopeful with the fully funded program, we can continue this critical support for your staff. Additionally, we'll be following up with an email with a full summary of the TA resources and the local staffing assistance provided. I'll now be switching gears to introduce our Housing Policy and Planning Tool, or HPPT, also a REAP 1.0 initiative that truly goes hand in hand with our TA program and overall local jurisdiction support. SANDAG's Housing Policy and Planning Tool is meant to be our online housing resource hub for policymakers, staff, and the public to support the implementation of housing elements. Since we started development of this tool last year, we've been actively engaging jurisdiction staff to develop this in a way that supports their needs and is useful to them. You can find it on SANDAG's open data portal. And we currently have 7 different tools or products seen on the screen here. Quickly, there are the Affordable Housing Case Studies, Housing Policy Resources, Housing Element Compliance Report, APR Housing Data Explorer, our ADU report, the RENA dashboard, and our anti-displacement strategies. And today I'll quickly be going over 4, which we're most excited about. The first product I'll show you is our APR data reports. In collaboration with SANDAG's data science team, we were able to geospatially code every permitted unit submitted by jurisdictions via your APRs since 2018. This tool will finally allow us to geospatially analyze at the regional level housing permitting data and provide some interesting regional insights. This example report on the slide shows a map of all multifamily housing permitted in the city of San Diego from 2018 to 2022. The bar chart below displays the multifamily units by year and by affordability. All of this data comes directly from HCD's Annual Progress Report API. Next, we have our ADU report. This report provides us a tool to analyze where ADUs are being permitted around the region, allowing the public and policymakers to gain useful insights to how ADU policy is working to spur development across the county. Many of your cities specifically have programs within your housing elements to analyze and record your ADU progress. The need for additional data reports to provide to the public and decision makers when speaking about ADUs has also been communicated by your staff. This report is absolutely meant to support that need. It allows you to analyze what affordability levels are being permitted where and allows jurisdictions to compare their production to surrounding communities. Here are some examples of interesting regional insights that can be found in the ADU report. You can see year-over-year ADU permitting trends by jurisdiction, as well as reports on the number and location of affordable ADU permits broken down by census tract. Also recently released is our 6th cycle RENA dashboard. This report tracks our regions and individual jurisdictions' progress towards our RENA housing goals. This report will be updated annually as jurisdictions submit their annual progress reports to HCD. The newest RENA data from 2023, which was submitted by your jurisdictions this April, will be updated and available to view in the dashboard, hopefully in the next month. Our last item to discuss today is our anti-displacement toolkit. This toolkit was built to help jurisdiction staff create, adopt, and implement anti-displacement policies specific to their jurisdiction and specific to the different types of communities within those jurisdictions. To conclude, all of the aspects of the HPPT I've mentioned are online and available for you to review today. But I'd like to note again that the HPPT is an iterative product which we continue to collect feedback on and build out to its fullest potential. Next, I'll be handing it back to Stacy to discuss our regional initiatives and explain what's next with REAP 1.0 and 2.0.
Thanks, Thomas. So the third strategy of HAP is regional initiatives, which includes studies and education, leadership, and funding opportunities to accelerate housing production. As you may have noticed, there's some overlap in how we classify these activities. For example, the anti-displacement strategy was a region-wide study that resulted in policy resources that we're housing on our housing policy and planning tool. So we also offer some educational opportunities. We have the Housing Policy Leadership Academy, or HPLA. It's a 10-session course that provides a forum for leaders and housing professionals to explore the relationship between policy, planning, and housing development. The 2 cohorts that graduated in December 2022 included 2 city council/board members, 6 policy advisors, 5 regional planners, 2 planning commissioners/planning group representatives, and 8 planning and housing department professionals representing 6 jurisdictions. Another cohort will be graduating next week, including 1 city council/board member, 2 staffers, and 17 staff representing 8 jurisdictions. The Housing Policy Bootcamp is a free course that provides HPLA grads and dedicated housing leaders with the opportunity to dive deeper into leadership and coalition building strategies. SANDAG will be offering the bootcamp for the first time this year in May and June. We've also held 6 policy forums open to the public that focused on housing policy issues and trends. Over 1,500 people have attended these events. With our capital mapping initiative, we identified public, private, and philanthropic funding opportunities to help meet regional housing targets and accelerate housing production. The Regional Value Capture Study, which Danielle presented on our last meeting, identifies and evaluates value capture instruments and joint development opportunities for the San Diego region. We'll be offering a TA workshop at the end of this month for jurisdiction staff, as Thomas had mentioned. So what's next? With REAP 1.0, wrapping up, we'll be concluding activities that were funded through this program and completing and submitting our closeout report. With REAP 2.0, we're waiting for the final FY 24-25 budget to be finalized to determine what the next steps are for REAP 2.0 and the Housing Acceleration Program. We're happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Stacy and Thomas. Francesca, do we have any public comment on this item?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the original draw, you can go ahead.
Sad to see how much funding was cut from the housing. And I don't know that there's an end in sight with the way things are going. And it's sad because if the planet was really being destroyed and whatnot without man doing it, and not in the way you think, but intentionally, then what you're doing would be good, because you'd want to, do housing and saving the planet at the same time. But we have people that are suffering. It's like we can't produce housing because of all of it's a revolving door of changes that comes through the policies and regulations. So, and that all has to do with the climate. And so we're not ever providing the housing that we could. It takes forever. And then by the time maybe somebody can, the funding runs out. And in the process, you're trying to put everybody in like really densely populated areas. And, it's like, I just don't understand. I mean, do you guys want an ADU on your property, or like 5 of them? I mean, it's getting to the point where you're going to preserve all this land out where nobody can touch it. All the beautiful land that it's our land. We need to be able to use it. Right. And it's like, but no, we can't. We have to save the planet. So let's put everybody in these stack and pack, like cement buildings with no like nature, but we can give you nature through like AI, and you can put it on, you can watch it on TV. It's sad to see like how much you guys push that. And if you understood the Agenda 21, 2030, 2050, you guys will use all the years, you use all the words, that you would understand it's about total control of all the people, and in putting them in a position where they can't even, leave their 15-minute city without a permit. I mean, that's coming. It's already happening in other countries. And it's like, it's a worldwide agenda, and you guys are playing along with it. And it's just sad because you're actually backing yourselves into a corner because they're just using you for this.
That concludes the public comments.
All right, thank you. This again is an information item. No motions required, and I'll turn it over to committee members for comments and questions. Anything? Oh, yes. I'm sorry, Mayor.
Hi. I noticed on the graph that my city of El Cajon was fairly low on the number of ADUs. And I just wonder what's fueling what cities have more ADUs and what cities have less. So I know that we've not done anything to discourage the building of ADUs. I assume it's an economics issue, where the value of the land is higher in some other places than other places, and people have trouble affording ADUs in certain cities. But what do you think?
That's a great question. I think ADUs development can happen for a lot of different reasons. There could be local policies like what the city of San Diego has implemented, which can help spur ADU development. The state has also tried to implement some ADU policies which can support ADU development. But like you said, there are larger macroeconomical factors that can contribute to ADUs being developed. The size of the lots of your city determines your ability to develop and permit ADUs as well. So it could be a lot of different factors. It's tough to say.
All right, thank you. Oh, yes.
Quick question for Thomas. One of the slides shows the number of multifamily units, the number of permits that were being issued that's available. Are we also tracking the number of actually units that are being built as well?
So within this report, the actual units built are not provided. That data is available within the annual progress reports of the jurisdictions. But for this report specifically, we just looked at permitted units.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, Mayor, I can say, representing the city of San Diego, we have bent over backwards to make it easy. You know, no parking requirements, reduced setback requirements, even waiving developer impact fees. I'm not much sure there's much more we can do to kind of encourage ADUs, and depending who you talk to, it's either a good thing or it's a bad thing.
I actually think in the current state of housing in San Diego, that it's probably a good thing.
Yep.
But I mean, depending on the kind of ADUs that are built, that's a debate. But just out of curiosity, we have zero developer impact fees, and we've also done all those things. So we have a lot. I'm just curious. I'd be curious to figure out the demographics of that.
There you go. Okay, not seeing any other comments or questions. Well, thank you again, Stacy and Thomas, for your presentation. And we'll keep our fingers crossed about the state budget and REAP 2.0. For those that might have been curious, I think the original idea to bring this item forward was to talk about REAP 2.0, but we'll just have to wait and see. And then as you come back, Stacy, so any cities that were notified of a REAP 2.0 award have now been notified. Don't spend the money.
That is correct. So the board approved awards back in, I believe, October. We had an internal change in system of our contracting system, and our notice to proceeds had not been released when the draft budget came out. So we let the cities know that at this point, not to move forward until we have more information on the budget. We had also asked them if they could reduce their scopes to continue to move forward, if there was a way that we could help them along while we waited for the budget, but unfortunately scopes couldn't be reduced enough. And we had received, so while the state budget said 50% reduction, HCD came out a few weeks later and said they would only reimburse up to 25%. So we took a big hit, and that was 25% was more than it was. I mean, we wouldn't have had enough money to fund all those projects. Not to mention that for REAP 2.0, we had to do a great deal of education and outreach to put together our program priorities. So it spent a lot of that money even putting together our application. So it's a wait and see. We're really we're hopeful. If we do get the money, we will be funding those projects. But at this point, we've had to put a hold on pretty much everything.
And most of those projects, 25% are just not worth pursuing. You really, so. All right, well, thank you for that. And like I said, we'll keep our fingers crossed. So we'll move on to the final item today, item 6, which is our regional climate action planning. Turn it over to Suzanne Friedman and Anna Bettis to present this item when you're ready.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for having us here. My name is Susan Friedman. I'm a climate planning manager in the planning department for SANDAG, and I did want to give a shout out here for Anna. She recently joined our team a few months ago. She's a senior planner here, and this is her first time presenting to a policy committee. So just FYI. But we're here to talk about really 3 big activities that are happening around regional climate action planning today. And they're all tied to a U.S. Environmental Protection Agency grant. So on the top half of the screen here, this is a planning grant. It was formula funding that SANDAG received. It was $1 million for a 4-year grant. To do 2 big things, a priority climate action plan or PCAP and a comprehensive one. And this is something that about 80 metro regions across the country, as well as 46 states, were also working on at the same time. And I'll highlight with the priority cap that's in the top right. That's something that we completed and turned into EPA on March 1st. And it was a pre-requirement for SANDAG and other governments in the region to be eligible to apply for a national competitive grant pot of almost $5 billion, which was to implement priority caps. To try and make sense of these things, I'll say the priority cap that was done, that focused on what are the biggest near-term priorities to reduce emissions that we can get done before 2030. And that's what the implementation grant tied to. In terms of what's coming next, and that we're hoping to hear from you on at the end of the presentation, is the comprehensive cap. This is going to be developed and prepared by next summer. And it's something we're doing in coordination with the 2025 regional plan. So it would be great to get any insights from what you're doing at your local governments. So before I jump into, we've got slides on the priority cap and comprehensive cap and grant, but I also wanted to highlight environmental justice communities and how the work with the EPA is significant. So not only is the goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the region, but it's also to do several things to prioritize equity. So first is doing outreach and engagement directed to underserved communities. So we've been working with the community-based organizations in the region. Another piece is to really analyze how the various greenhouse gas reduction measures and programs around them are going to prioritize low-income and disadvantaged communities. So, and then when it comes to competitive grants to implement projects, you get higher scores and they have greater importance if the programs that we apply for really have a focus in low income and disadvantaged communities. So the map here is one that is of our CBO partner network. There's currently 12 CBOs we work with, and we have been offering them funding to help us with community engagement going forward as well. So the picture on the right here is what the cover of the Priority Climate Action Plan for the San Diego region. So what we did, again, focus by 2030. We really looked at our highest greenhouse gas emissions in the region. So transportation is about half, followed by electricity, as well as buildings or natural gas from the building sector. So that's about 80% of the emissions in the region. So from working with the local governments here, we held monthly meetings with most of your staff, as well as with other regional agencies and with community groups. We targeted those significant areas for reductions. We built upon locally adopted climate action plans, sustainability plans, as well as the regional plan to determine what were priorities. And then we went out and talked again to local governments, we talked to tribal governments, and we talked to lots of community organizations and environmental groups. And from that, we pulled together what became the Climate Action Plan. And so this was due to EPA on March 1st, and we heard back from EPA a week later that it fulfilled all the criteria to make the San Diego region eligible to compete for that $4.6 billion pot of competitive grant funds. So to talk a little bit more about where I have some bullets here, it says 9 measures and then 22 actions, what that means is really this slide here, as well as the attachment to your report, shows what we're talking about. So measures, and I'm not going to read through all of these in transportation and building and energy. We also had a water measure, but say for increasing the use of public transit, that would be a measure. The action for that would be to support bus rapid transit routes to increase service. Another action there was to expand the youth opportunity pass, so to enable more people, more youth to take advantage of transit. So that's just one example in the area of measures and actions that were part of the PCAP. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Anna, and she's going to walk through what we did for the implementation grant as well as the comprehensive cap.
Thank you, Susan. All right, so you heard from Susan about the work that EPA funded to develop the Priority Climate Action Plan with measures that could be implemented by 2030. And so now I'll be talking more about the measures that were included in the competitive proposal that SANDAG submitted. And this was a really exciting opportunity to hopefully bring some of that historic federal funding to the San Diego region to fund climate action. This was through the EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. As Susan mentioned, that made available $4.6 billion. And for programs or projects to be eligible, they needed to be included in a priority cap that was developed through that EPA program. The EPA stressed the importance of regional collaboration, given that they will only be awarding between 30 and a little over 100 of these competitive grants across the entire country. And so at the end of March, SANDAG submitted a proposal for the region for $199 million to this program, with roughly 60% of the funds requested to support transportation programs and projects, and 40% to support building and clean energy programs that would be implemented by the San Diego Community Power through their regional energy network. And to prepare the proposal, SANDAG coordinated with local governments and partner agencies in the region. And to determine which of those programs would be included in the proposal, the project team weighed EPA's evaluation criteria and included programs and projects that have the most cumulative greenhouse gas reductions. The programs and projects in the proposal also reflect the priorities that were expressed by local governments and partner agencies and stakeholders who provided input through the process through surveys and workshops that were held by SANDAG. You can see some of them on the pictures here on the slides. And so looking ahead, we expect to hear back in July about which proposals were selected for funding, so really hopeful. And then if we're selected in October is when EPA is going to be issuing the grant funds. And if awarded, we would have through October of 2029 to actually implement all the programs and projects, which I will talk about next. Okay, so on this slide, you can see the 7 programs and projects that we included in the proposal. You can read more in more detail about those on page 2 of the attachment to the staff report if you're interested, but I'll walk through them now. This includes the San Diego Air Pollution Control District implementing a regional medium and heavy duty charging infrastructure program with incentives for truck or bus charging. SANDAG implementing a regional zero emission vehicle incentive program, which would include rebates for low and moderate income residents to buy new or used EVs, as well as rebates for municipal fleets that would be open to local governments and tribal governments in San Diego County. It would include funding for augmenting SANDAG's regional active transportation grant program to provide more money for local jurisdictions. That program offers grants to local governments and tribal governments to construct active transportation projects. Also in the proposal is expanding transit incentive programs, including the Youth Opportunity Pass to provide free transit for all youth 18 and under for 3 additional years, and the Tri-Transit program to provide 30-day passes for commuters. It also includes one bus rapid transit project in a transit desert, which would service the communities of Ramona and Poway. The proposal also includes a few building and energy programs that would be run by San Diego Community Power, as I mentioned. The first is a regional building electrification program for residents in single-family and multifamily housing to receive financial incentives, technical assistance, and direct installation of high-efficiency heating and cooling equipment, which may expand to local and tribal governments, as well as regional residential solar and energy program for residents and residential building owners to receive financial incentives and technical assistance to install solar and energy storage systems. So we're really enthusiastic about the suite of programs and projects here, and we will keep you updated on that award if it happens. Next, another deliverable, as Susan mentioned, of that planning grant that we received to create the Priority Climate Action Plan is the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. So the CCAP, as we call it, will be a visionary document going out to 2050, and it will include all sectors such as industry, transportation, agriculture, waste, et cetera. The CCAP will be done in coordination with the 2025 regional plan. It needs to include an updated greenhouse gas inventory, greenhouse gas reduction measures, projections and targets, quantification of air pollution reduction, quantification of benefits to low-income and disadvantaged communities, and an analysis of workforce needs to achieve the CCAP goals. Next, I'll talk about the timing. We're still finalizing the timeline for the CCAP development, but I'll give you a quick high-level overview. So this year in the spring, we're anticipating starting the new greenhouse gas inventory. Then in the summer, we'll be kicking off our stakeholder engagement, working with your staff and the community. In the fall, we expect to hold workshops to share the draft CCAP measures and to get input. In the spring, we expect to have the draft CCAP completed and finishing up the document in the summer. As I mentioned, the CCAP will be completed in coordination with the 2025 regional plan, and we expect that to be completed in winter of 2025. And the greenhouse gas inventory that we'll be developing for the CCAP will also appear in the regional plan. So looking ahead, we want to hear any priorities that you have that we should feed into this process moving forward. And that concludes our presentation. Look forward to hearing any questions or comments you might have.
Great. Thank you, Susan. Welcome aboard, Anna. Great first presentation to a committee. Appreciate that. So Francesca, do we have any public comment on this item?
Thank you, Vice Chair. We do. The original draw, you can go ahead.
It's crazy when money is the root of all evil, what it'll do. Because like, as you guys sit there and talk about giving financial incentives because it's all to change behaviors, right? Everybody talks about we got to change the behavior so people do things differently so that we can save the planet, or we can do this, or we can do that. We can get them to take a vaccine. But the federal government is doing, and the state are doing the same thing to you by offering incentives to push a certain agenda. You know, you'll go for that, because if there was no money coming from, you know, this whole pretend to save the planet shenanigan, you would be going for whatever that was. And if it was like on the good side where it was like, you know, I mean, who knows what, but it's just sad to think that we can do all of these things, like even with electric vehicles. I mean, there's no infrastructure for this. People are stressed out just trying to find a place. Like they're giving people anxiety medication because they have anxiety reach for not being able to make it to an electric charger. And then, you know, I've even been where there's an electric charger that is on the same spot as a handicap spot. So it's like, it's not always going to be available to somebody who's handicapped, because somebody who can charge it in EV, it could sit there, and then it's taking away from somebody that actually needs that parking. So, I mean, none of the stuff you do makes sense. All that stuff emits radiation, immense amounts of irradiation from the electric chargers, from the cars. I mean, it's just like our phones do, but this is on a massive scale, and they do way more damage to the road. And we people who pay taxes from the gas are paying for them to destroy the road while they don't pay for anything. And you're using the money from the gas drivers to get us out of our cars. So it's like a way bigger picture than people see. But what happens is when you incentivize people, that's when you know it's not right.
That concludes the public comments.
All right, this again is an information item, although I think staff is looking for some feedback. So I'll turn it over to committee members for any comments or questions. Sir.
I just have a really good question, sorry. I was just curious about the Express 277 Rapid bus. So the grant would fund operation of that. But what happens, you know, if you receive the funding, but what happens when the grant funding runs out?
For the Rapid project, that we came up with that through the discussions with the transit planning team here. So it's to get the project off the ground, to do all of the design and implement to make it an actual route. And so it does address, I believe it does address the operations through the grant duration of 2029. But after 2029, that's where future funding would need to be found. It was already a route that was identified and included for the 2025 regional plan for the draft element of that. So we were already going to need to figure out how to fund that. So this is kickstarting making that available.
And my apologies, Councilmember Musgrove.
Real quickly, with the, I'm happy to see that the plan was so well received. And maybe I missed it, but did they offer a date when those grants might be awarded?
Yeah, they're expecting to award in October of this year.
Okay, and the cycle is 2 years or 3?
We would have through October of 2029 to spend the funds.
Fantastic, thank you.
Not seeing any other hands go up. I'll ask, so you have the priority climate action plan in hand, and then you have the climate action plans that have been adopted by the jurisdictions. Will that kind of form the baseline for the work that you're doing with the comprehensive? Or as a regional entity, will you take a slightly different direction?
We keep looking at each other. You going, you going. It'll definitely be built on not just the local climate action plans and the regional plan, but also the county did the regional decarbonization framework. So we're going to look at some caps were done before state laws changed and became more aggressive. So we're going to build from adopted caps, but then bring in what are the newest, latest requirements and trends for being able to reduce emissions significantly.
Oh, okay. I find this incredibly important. I know that for a lot of jurisdictions, the component of success of their climate action plans really is relying on people to change their behavior, which can be the difficult thing. We've committed to going to 100% renewable energy, which we can make that decision. It's in place, but some of the other things require some change of behavior. That gets to be the most challenging for all of us, and especially for SANDAG that controls the biggest greenhouse gas emitter, which is transportation. And what does it take to make get people out of single occupancy cars to get from A to B differently to make a huge difference on that. So I've always been very excited and appreciate those people that will actually take that challenge on to see how we actually make that happen. It is one of our bigger challenges. And I know sometimes we can get hung up on the word incentive. The program that San Diego Community Power is going to be rolling out, I think we have our final approvals as the regional network, is not so much incentives as actually subsidies, that the conversion to more cost-efficient electrical appliances or even making your house more efficient can often be beyond the capacity, the financial capacity of homeowners. And so some of this is actually to help them mitigate some of the cost of that, not just to, can we give you enough money to do something? It's, let's help you because you want to do something going forward. So that is a challenge. And it also, to kind of wrap up, it looked like you look forward to a pretty robust outreach program, both to the general public and to the jurisdictions as well.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, we're planning to host 3 workshops with the community and continue the monthly meetings that we have with local governments. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, and we're also working on contracting with the local CBOs to do additional engagement in communities that we would be working with them on.
Okay. And for those of us who don't go to the board meetings, what is the timeline for this compared to the timeline for the regional plan itself?
Maybe let's go back.
Okay.
Oh, no, it's not in here. But on the timeline slide, we expect to have a draft of the comprehensive cap completed in spring. Our hope is around April of next year. And then similarly, we are expecting, or the regional plan team thinks they're going to have a draft done for the public as early as April or May. So it should coincide really well. We're looking at, from the measures we developed prior to that, that we'll be able to work with the team and work with Keith on the environmental impact report as well, for where we can pull in elements of CCAP to support the regional plan in reducing emissions. And then we have a final CCAP is July 21st, to be exact, of 2025. The final regional plan, and Keith can correct me, but it's typically the end of the year 2025.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing any other comments. We'll wrap up item 6, and that will bring us to the end of our agenda. And I appreciate everybody's participation today. The next meeting is a joint meeting with the Regional Planning Committee and the Transportation and Border Committees, which is scheduled for Friday, June 21st at 9 a.m. And then the next regular meeting of the Regional Planning Committee is Friday, July 5th at 1 p.m. If you check your calendars, I don't expect a lot of people to show up for a July 5th meeting with the long 4th of July weekend. So you'll it's not canceled yet, but I think we probably will be canceling that rather than trying to reschedule that. So anyway, again, thank you for everybody's participation and for those of you that have driven down to attend this meeting. And thank you to staff for your good work. So thank you and have a good weekend.
You too.